Here we are at the intro screen for Bluebook practice exam number 8. And you can see we've got a set of instructions. We're going to hit next. And once I do that, I am dumped directly into the first section and first module of the reading and writing. The timer started at 48 minutes here because I gave myself time and a half to allow me more time to read aloud and explain things as I'm doing them. But on the actual section, you will have 32 minutes for your 27 questions, not the 48 I started with here. You shouldn't really need any of these informational boxes, so you'll just go straight into the questions. And as always, this reading and writing module begins with our vocabulary in context question style. So we're going to do these first. We don't really need to highlight the task because we know what we're supposed to do as soon as we see these questions, hopefully. And we're going to read the little information on the left and highlight the information that directly influences the blank so that we have that as a de facto prediction that we can then compare our answer choices against before reading our choice back into the sentences to guarantee that they create an overall coherent narrative. So let's do that here with question number 1. As Mexico's first president from an indigenous community, Benito Juarez became one of the most blank figures in his country's history. Among the many significant accomplishments of his long tenure in office, Juarez consolidated the authority of the national government and advanced the rights of indigenous peoples. Well, we should recognize that he was a significant figure, so we'll just highlight significant and we'll find our answer choice that best matches significant. So choice A, unpredictable, certainly does not match significant. Important certainly could. Let's select it proactively. Secretive, there's nothing to indicate that he was secretive, and secretive certainly does not match significant in context. And ordinary would be a tone reversal. Let's now read important back into this sentence to confirm an overall coherent narrative. As Mexico's first president from an indigenous community, Benito Juarez became one of the most important figures in his country's history. Among the many significant accomplishments of his long tenure in office, Juarez consolidated the authority of the national government and advanced the rights of indigenous peoples. I would say that captures the overall narrative, and we'll click next. Here, once again, we have a vocabulary in context question. We will read on the left. Artist Marilyn Dingle's intricate coil baskets are blank, sweet grass, and palmetto palm. Following a gullah technique that originated in West Africa, Dingle skillfully winds a thin palm frond around a bunch of sweetgrass with the help of a sewing bone to create the basket's signature look that no factory can reproduce. So that's really the key. No factory can reproduce it, because she is doing this skillfully winding of a palm frond around a bunch of sweetgrass. So we'll just highlight those phrases. It doesn't have to be one word. We don't have to have a specific word in mind, and we just got to find an answer choice that would match these ideas. She's skillfully doing it, and no factory can do it the same way. So choice A, indicated by, just because it's indicated by sweetgrass and palmetto palm wouldn't mean that a factory can't reproduce it. Handmade from, well, handmade skills would not be reproducible by a factory, so B matches pretty well. Choice C, represented by, again, very similar to indicated by. If you have two answer choices that create the same meaning in context, each has to be wrong because you can't select both of them. So C and A are really close. They're both going to be incorrect. And then choice D, collected with, it's actually made with sweetgrass and palmetto palm, not collected with it. Again, on the actual exam, you would reread choice B back into the sentences to confirm an overall narrative, but for the purposes of this video, we will click next. Here we've got The Mule Bone, a 1930 play written by Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes, is perhaps the best known of the few examples of blank in literature. Most writers prefer working alone, and given that working together cost Hurston and Hughes their friendship, it's not hard to see why. Well, it's one of the few examples of working together in literature. So we'll just highlight that phrase, working together, and we're looking for an answer choice that matches working together in context. Characterization certainly does not. Interpretation does not either. Collaboration certainly would. Commercialization certainly does not. If you don't know any of the answer choice meanings, do add them to a vocabulary list for further review outside of your practice sections, practice exams. But of course, if you read collaboration back into these sentences, you would get an overall coherent narrative, and we will click next at this time. Looking at number 4, another vocabulary and context question. We read, Diego Velázquez was the leading artist in the court of King Philip IV of Spain during the 17th century, but his influence was hardly blank Spain. Realist and impressionist painters around the world employed his techniques and echoed elements of his style, so we know that he was important around the world. So if he's important around the world, then his influence is not going to be limited to Spain. And if your highlight doesn't exactly match a prediction, you could just say limited in the little note box here is my prediction. So we're going to look for an answer choice that matches limited. So derived from, absolutely not, that does not match limited. Recognized in, that does not match limited. Well, confined to certainly would match limited in context, and repressed by, well, that's pretty extreme. And again, if you don't know enough of these words, you'll have to add them to a vocabulary list, but provided you do know their definitions, you should recognize that confined to is going to fit well into the overall narrative in the blank. Again, on the actual exams, you'll want to read your choice back into the sentence to confirm overall coherence, but in the interest of time for this video, we will click next. Here, we've got one more vocabulary and context question. We read from the beginning, researchers and conservationists stress that biodiversity loss due to invasive species is blank. For example, people can take simple steps such as washing their footwear after travel to avoid introducing potentially invasive organisms into new environments. Well, we can just highlight avoid and know that something in a different part of speech, like avoidable, would work here very nicely. So choice A, preventable, absolutely would match. Avoidable in context. Undeniable is really a tone reversal. Common, again, is, while it might be true, it's not going to fit within the context of the narrative. And concerning, again, it might be true, but you have to make sure you're agreeing with the rest of the narrative in the second sentence. Make sure that you're considering the entirety of the narrative and not just picking something that sounds good without really reading all the way through. Of course, you'll read preventable back into the blank to confirm overall coherence. But for the purposes of this video, we'll click next. And we see our first non-vocabulary question. And for most test takers, we're going to do what I'm going to do right now. As soon as you see the first contextual reading comprehension question, you're going to skip to the end and work backwards. This will allow you to get through all of the writing style questions that generally take individuals less time on average to complete, so that you're not feeling rushed and taking shortcuts when you're going through these contextual reading questions. So we're going to go straight to number 27. And here we've got our first question type where we're being asked to basically synthesize information from some notes to accomplish some task. So we read the question first. The student wants to emphasize the aim of the research study. Which choice most effectively uses information from the notes to accomplish this goal? I don't really need that second sentence. That second sentence is pretty much going to be the same for all of these questions that present you notes, but I do want to highlight what the student wants to do. So now we're going to read the notes on the left-hand side and highlight only the pieces, the bullets, that actually emphasize the aim of the research study for clear reference. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Most, but not all, of the moon's oxygen comes from the sun via solar wind. Wonderful. Doesn't tell me anything about the aim of this research study. Cosmochemist KT. I'm just going to use the initials, understanding that it's not necessary to try to pronounce a name I'm not familiar with. From Osaka University, wondered if some of the unaccounted for oxygen could be coming from Earth. Well, that's what he's trying to determine. So I'm going to just highlight this second bullet as relevant to the goal of the correct answer choice. Then in 2008, he analyzed data from the Japanese satellite K. Again, this is just what he's doing, not the aim. K gathered data about gases and particles encountered while orbiting the moon. Again, methodology, not the purpose. Based on the K data, Terada confirmed his suspicion that Earth is sending oxygen to the moon. So that's the result, not the aim. And really, I just need to find an answer choice that best matches that second bullet. So choice A, As it orbited the moon, the K satellite collected data. Well, collecting the data, I can highlight as the reason to eliminate here. We don't want the method, we want the purpose. Choice B, before 2008, KT wondered if the moon was receiving some of its oxygen from Earth. Maybe. I don't love it because it doesn't talk about the research study specifically, but we'll hold on to it for now. Choice C, cosmochemist KT set out to determine whether some of the moon's oxygen was coming from Earth. Absolutely, that matches exactly what we wanted to focus on. And at this point, I can just eliminate B, knowing it's not as good as C. Then choice D, KT's study determined that Earth is sending a small amount of oxygen to the moon. Well, that is going to be the result, not the aim. So we can select choice C and we'll hit back at this point, and we'll hit back through the rest of the questions all the way back through question 6. We left off with question 5, having completed that as the set of vocabulary and context questions. Here, the student wants to emphasize the role a misconception played in naming a place. So I just highlight that phrase, and we're going to read on the left-hand side and try to find some misconception involved in naming a place. I don't know what that means, but we'll find out here soon. I don't really need to read that opening statement. We're going to go straight to the bullets this time. Las Surgas de Esplandian, I shouldn't have tried to pronounce that. I'm just going to say Las SDE. Was a novel popular in 16th century Spain. Wonderful. The novel featured a fictional island inhabited solely by black women and known as California. That same century, Spanish explorers learned of an island, in quotes, off the west coast of Mexico. They called it California after the island in the novel. The island was actually the peninsula now known as Baja California, Lower California, which lies to the south of the U.S. state of California. Oh. They thought it was an island, but it's not. It was a peninsula, and it was named after this popular 16th century novel. So we're going to just highlight these things in yellow, and we're going to seek an answer choice that synthesizes this information well. Choice A, the novel, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it a second time, featured a fictional island known as California. Well, that doesn't explain how it played into a misconception of naming the place. Then choice B, to the south of the U.S. state of California lies Baja California, originally called California after a fictional place. Well, that's true, but it doesn't explain the misconception at all. Then choice C, in the 16th century, Spanish explorers learned of a peninsula off the west coast of Mexico and called it California. Again, they did that, but it has no indication of how this was a misconception that played a role in naming the place. But then choice D, thinking it was an island, Spanish explorers called a peninsula California after an island in a popular novel, and it's that thinking it was an island that's most important. You can highlight reasons to select as well as you're working through these answer choices. Of course, D is correct for 26. We hit back and we've got number 25. We have another one of these synthesizing the notes questions. The student wants to contrast the emissivity of reflective metal fibers with that of silicon carbide fibers. I have no idea what this means. Science, honestly, was my worst subject long ago. But I should recognize they're going to give me the information that's necessary in the information on the left. So we're going to read from the first bullet. Physicist M.A., again, just use the initials, was working on a garment suited for both warm and cold conditions. He analyzed the emissivity or ability to emit heat of the materials he planned to use. Okay, so that's just background. It doesn't actually compare them, the emissivity of silicon and metal fibers, or silicon carbide fibers. Then A found that reflective metal fibers emitted almost no heat and had an emissivity of 0.02. Wonderful, that's part of what we wanted to know. He also found that silicon carbide fibers absorbed large amounts of heat and had an emissivity of 0.74. Again, definitely part of the contrast we want to focus on. And the amount of heat a material absorbs is equal to the amount of heat it emits. Wonderful background, but not contrasting the exact goal as we highlighted on the right. So, choice A, the ability of reflective metal fibers and silicon carbide fibers to emit heat was determined by an analysis of each material's emissivity. Well, we're not concerned with the analysis. We'll just highlight that and eliminate choice A. Choice B, the amount of heat a material absorbs is equal to the amount it emits. Again, that's just the background. I don't care about this background. I want to actually contrast the reflective metal fibers with the silicon carbide fibers. So B is out. Then choice C, though the reflective metal fibers and silicon carbide fibers had different rates of emissivity, a BB planned to use both in a garment. Maybe, at least we're saying they have different rates at this point. So we'll hold on to that and highlight that specific phrase for reference in choice C. But then choice D, whereas the reflective metal fibers had an emissivity of just 0.02, the silicon carbide fibers absorbed large amounts of heat, resulting in emissivity of 0.74. Well, that's exactly what we should be looking for. We're going to select D, eliminate C, and we'll click back to one more of these note synthesis style questions. We're being asked to emphasize the order in which Alaska and Hawaii became states this time. We'll highlight that in yellow. So again, don't really care about that introduction. On January 3, 1959, Alaska became the 49th state to join the U.S. On August 21st, 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state to join the U.S. I'm just going to highlight these two things, and because that's really all I care about, I can even highlight them in different colors for clear contrast, knowing that Alaska goes before Hawaii. So choice A, Alaska, the 49th state, became a state several months before Hawaii, the 50th state, did. Absolutely, that matches well. We should be able to go briskly through the remaining answer choices. Choice B, on August 21st, 1959, a new 50-star U.S. flag was unveiled. Well, that doesn't tell me anything about the order, so goodbye to B. Choice C, the 49th and 50th states to join the U.S. did so in the same year. Well, great, but it doesn't tell me the order, so goodbye to choice C. And the same day that Hawaii became a U.S. state, a new U.S. flag was unveiled. Okay, when did Alaska become a U.S. state? At least for choice D, so goodbye to D. Of course, we probably could have selected A little bit faster, but just for the purposes of the video, we want to make sure we've got reasons to eliminate every answer choice, and you really do probably want to check all of the answer choices for every reading and writing question just to be sure. But we hit back one more time, and now we are in our more writing focused portion. I mean, the end of it is technically writing too, but here we're being asked to find transitions that fit within the context. So we will just highlight the task of finding a transition. And the way that you're going to engage all transition identification tasks is we're going to note what the big picture information is before the blank and after the blank, and determine first whether that information is in agreement or contrast. If it's in agreement, we'll highlight in the same color. If it's in contrast, we'll highlight in different colors. So let's read on the left. In 1974, Mexican chemist Mario Molina and U.S. chemist F. Sherwood Rowland discovered that chemicals called CFCs were harmful to the ozone layer. Their research was extremely influential in the fight against CFCs. Blank, it laid the foundation for a 1987 treaty that phased out the use of CFCs across the globe. Okay, so we know that we ended up with this research phasing out CFCs. And we know the prior sentence is saying that their research was extremely influential. So these things are in agreement. I'm just going to highlight both in yellow and say I need to find an answer choice that gives me an agreement indicating transition. So each of regardless and however are going to be contrast indicators. We should be able to eliminate them immediately. You do need to recognize the chronology, though. The research came in 1974. The treaty came in 1987. 1987 is not earlier than 1974, so our correct answer is going to be B. Specifically, on the actual exam, you'll want to read these transition choices back into the sentence to confirm an overall coherent narrative, but for the purposes of this video, we'll click back at this point. Now we've got another transition task. We'll just, again, highlight the word transition. And on the left, we begin reading, although those who migrated to California in 1849 dreamed of finding gold nuggets in stream beds, the state's richest deposits were buried deeply in rock beyond the reach of individual prospectors. Blank, by 1852, many had given up their fortune hunting dreams and gone to work for one of the large companies capable of managing California's complex mining operations. So we know that after the blank is referring to these many who had given up their fortune hunting dreams. And those were the individual prospectors who had their goals of finding gold beyond their reach. So these two statements around the blank, once again, are in agreement. So we don't want to choose a contrast transition. So still is really going to be a contrast indicator. And when we look at next, that means that like literally what happens next, and there's probably a third thing, and if we were to read choice D in there, it's just not going to make sense. And furthermore is going to expand on the same concept, so like the same event, but 1852 is definitely going to be a different event. So our correct answer is going to be consequently, and this time we will read it in just to confirm an overall narrative, as the one transition question will read into the sentence for this video. Although those who migrated to California in 1849 dreamed of finding gold nuggets in stream beds, the state's richest deposits were buried deeply in rock beyond the reach of individual prospectors. Consequently, by 1852, many had given up their fortune hunting dreams and gone to work for one of the large companies capable of managing California's complex mining operations. Hopefully, you can see the cause and effect relationship here, and we'll click back to number 21. And we have our first of the standard English convention style questions. And you want to note what's changing in the answer choices to inform your approach. Here, we should note that we've got basically punctuation changing after the word content in each of the answer choices, including where there is no punctuation. When that happens, what you can do is really ignore the sentence or sentences that aren't pertaining to the blank up front. If we're having trouble, we might evaluate that first sentence, but really I shouldn't need to. And we're going to use something known as the vertical line test. So I'm going to highlight around the blank, and we're going to just open up that little note thing here again. And we're going to put a vertical line. And that vertical line is going to represent where our punctuation lies. And we're going to have the word content before the vertical line. And then we've got in that after the vertical line. And we want to consider whether before the vertical line we have a complete independent clause that could stand on its own as a full sentence. And whether after that vertical line, starting with the phrase in that, we have a complete idea that could stand alone as its own independent sentence. So we will read just from the word Gitlin's. Gitlin's use of the term referenced TV studios' practice of repackaging successful narrative formulas as new content. Okay, that's a complete sentence. We've got a subject and verb of Gitlin's use, and then, Gitlin's use reference, right? So that's a complete idea. And now we're going to read from in that. In that era, even shows that varied only slightly from other shows still attracted sizable audiences. Well, still attracted is the verb, and in that era, in that era even shows that varied only slightly. That's going to be a relatively complex subject, but it's still complete. So now we know that we've got a complete idea before the punctuation theoretically and after the punctuation theoretically. We can't just separate with a comma then. That would come between a complete and incomplete idea. We could separate with a semicolon, however, so we'll hold on to choice B. Then choice C, we can't have no punctuation at all, so goodbye to choice C. And then choice D, we don't want to have a comma again, so goodbye to D. We will read this with the pauses mentally to see if everything works. But again, I don't really need to read that opening sentence. So Gitlin's use of the term referenced TV studios' practice of repackaging successful narrative formulas as new content. In that era, even shows that varied only slightly from other shows still attracted sizable audiences. That works, and we can hit back knowing that choice B was the correct answer for number 21. Again, we've got a vertical line test opportunity here because we see the changing punctuation. I'm just going to highlight this opening sentence in red so we know we don't really need to focus on it. We're going to highlight the information directly around the blank and set up our vertical line after the word varied. And I don't want to put the while here. I just want to consider it without first. And so if we don't have the while, the word after the vertical line will be some. So before and after, The number of jams available for tasting varied. Okay, so that could stand as its own complete sentence very easily. The number of jams available for tasting varied. Varied is the verb, the number of jams is the subject, so that's fine. If we pick up after varied without the while, some shoppers had 24 different options, others only 6. Okay, so some shoppers would be the subject, had would be the verb. This is another complete idea. I need something that can follow a complete idea and then be followed by a complete idea. A comma cannot be. A comma cannot be, even if we did while, it's going to change the meaning, so it makes it sound like it's only while they had these options. The number of jams available varies, period. And same thing with choice D. We don't want to introduce the while. It changes the meaning, and we'd have a run-on because we wouldn't have any punctuation after that introductory complete idea. Now, the colon is a bit of a nuanced punctuation mark. It can have either a complete or incomplete idea follow the colon without a transition or conjunction. But you cannot have anything except for a complete idea precede the colon. And what we've got here with number 20 would allow proper colon usage. On the exam, you might read your choice back into the sentence, but for the purposes of this video, we'll click back knowing that A was correct for number 20. Moving on to number 19, we've got another vertical line test opportunity. Once more, we are not going to concern ourselves with that opening sentence, and we're going to highlight just around the blank so we can set up our vertical line test. So we're going to have nickname, and then what we can do here, because we know the transition of however is kind of breaking up the main ideas, or really just the ideas of the sentence overall, I'm going to have feeling be on the other side. Basically trying to remove the however from consideration so far. So we're going to have before the blank and after the blank as we have to this point. So Scott Heron himself resisted the Godfather nickname. Well, that's a complete idea. He resisted, so simple enough. Feeling that it didn't encapsulate his devotion to the broader African American blues music tradition, as well as bluesologist, the moniker he preferred. That's an incomplete idea. So we know this is going to be incomplete afterwards because there's no subject. It was Scott Heron who did the feeling. So we don't want to have a semicolon here. So we can eliminate the two answer choices that use a semicolon because a semicolon is going to have to come between two complete ideas. Theoretically, it could be replaced by a period and a capital if it's truly coming between two complete ideas. Then we've got to consider, do we want to have that, however, bracketed or just with one on one side with a comma? And we should know that whenever we've got bracketed commas, that means that we should be able to remove that word and still have an overall complete narrative for the sentence. So let's do that here. Scott Heron himself resisted the Godfather nickname, feeling that it didn't encapsulate his devotion to the broader African American blues music tradition, as well as bluesologist, the moniker he preferred. The bracket we can certainly remove, however, and have the sentence make overall coherent sense. We'll select C and click back at this point. Here, again, we've got a question asking about punctuation, but hopefully this time we don't need to be going through the vertical line test because we should recognize we've got this pair of people, Roberto Scandone and Christopher Kilburn, who are researchers. So I'm probably thinking to myself, I don't want to separate the researchers from this. But we'll just read through, and again, I don't really need to worry about this introductory sentence, so we'll just highlight that in our pink and ignore it. So unfortunately, as researchers, commas, Roberto and Christopher, absolutely not. I don't want the comma. They are researchers. They're not separate. So we can eliminate B and A for that reason. And then choice D, we don't want a comma and an and between two people, just two people. A list of two is either comma or and, not both. Our correct answer is C, and we can move back from number 18. Here we introduce a pronoun test, basically. And in this case, I actually need to look at the prior sentence because I need to determine whether what was exhibited is going to be singular or plural in order to determine whether it should be an it, a this, a some, or a they. So in 1930, Japanese American artist Kira Obata depicted the natural beauty of Yosemite National Park in two memorable woodcuts. In 2019, and again, I don't need to read what the woodcuts are, blank exhibited. Well, there were two of them. So we'll just highlight two memorable woodcuts. So it needs to be plural. It can't be it. It can't be this because those are going to be singular. And it's not a sum because a sum is not going to refer specifically to these two woodcuts. Only they will. You would read they were back into the sentence to confirm an overall coherent narrative on the actual exam, but we'll hit back at this time for the purposes of this video. Here again, we may need to consider the prior sentence to evaluate these verb tenses. So, formed in 1967 to foster political and economic stability within the Asia-Pacific region, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations was originally made up of 5 members. So I want to highlight made up of, because that is going to be another verb that I can refer back to. And we don't need to read the members. By the end of the 1990s, okay, so the organization blank its initial membership. Well, we're talking about the end of the 1990s. It's certainly not the 1990s right now. So the organization has doubled only if today is the 1990s, and it is not. The organization had doubled. Well, that would be the proper tense for the end of the 1990s. Doubles is going to be like present. That doesn't make any sense. And the future is not the 1990s. We'd read choice B back into the sentence or sentences to confirm an overall narrative, but we'll hit back now, and we are in those reading comprehension questions that we skipped. So now we know that we don't have to rush. We're going to go through these deliberately. So which choice most logically completes the text? I want to go to the end and highlight what we're going to have to be most attentive to for this blank. So we want to see what the findings are going to suggest. So we're going to read here. Birds of many species ingest foods containing carotenoids, pigmented molecules that are converted into feather coloration. Coloration tends to be especially saturated in male birds' feathers, and because carotenoids also confer health benefits, the deeply saturated colors generally serve to communicate what is known as an honest signal of a bird's overall fitness to potential mates. However, ornithologist Alison Schultz and others have found that males in several species of the tanager genus R use microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light, creating the appearance of deeper saturation without the birds necessarily having to maintain a carotenoid-rich diet. Okay, so they appear to be healthy, but they're not. So we know it is generally known as an honest signal, but in this case, and we're going to use the pink to indicate it, it is not an honest signal. So we need to find an answer choice that matches those facts. So choice A, individual male tanagers can engage in honest signaling without relying on carotenoid consumption. It's not honest signaling. So as soon as we find honest signaling, we're going to highlight that in either color, really, and eliminate choice A. Choice B, feather microstructures may be less effective than deeply saturated feathers for signaling overall fitness. Well, we're not using the microstructures in that way, so we'll eliminate choice B. Then choice C, scientists have yet to determine why tanagers have a preference for mates with colorful appearances. Well, that's not true. It's because they seem to be healthy, so eliminate choice C. And then choice D, a male tanager's appearance may function as a dishonest signal of the individual's overall fitness. Absolutely, and we'll click back at this point. Here, again, we have a question asking for what would logically complete the text, and we're going to read that final sentence. If both the artifact dates and the 14th century CE founding date are correct, that would imply, so we need to find something that is going to follow from those two facts. So we're going to focus on those facts as we read. If some artifacts recovered from excavations of the settlement of KK in modern Ghana date from the 13th century CE, that may lend credence to claims that the settlement was founded before or around that time. There is other evidence, however, strongly supporting a 14th century CE founding date for KK. So that's the contrast. We've got these excavations that show some artifacts date from the 13th century, but the founding wasn't until the 14th century. So how can we have 13th century artifacts in a 14th century founded place? I don't know, but that's what's got to be in mind. Choice A, artifacts from the 14th century are more commonly recovered than are artifacts from the 13th century. Whoa, we're just talking about this one settlement KK. I need a whole lot of additional information to say what A says, so goodbye to A. Choice B, the artifacts originated elsewhere and eventually reached KK through trade or migration. Well, yeah, that'll reconcile the difference. So B shows how the artifacts can be from the 13th century, but KK would have been found in the 14th, so that seems pretty good. Then choice C, KK was founded by people from a different region than had been previously assumed. What was previously assumed? I have no idea. So C would require additional information, can be eliminated for that reason. Then choice D, excavations at KK may have inadvertently damaged some artifacts. We don't know that at all. There's nothing about the condition that they're in. So we'd select B and click back at this point. Again, we have a question asking to complete the text, so we've got to find what is suggested in Green's view. The musical Hadestown was produced off-Broadway in New York in 2016. A revised version of the musical premiered on Broadway in 2019 in a larger production. In a review of the Broadway production, theater critic Jesse Green enthusiastically praised the musical's storytelling. So I want to highlight that piece because that's important. So we know that's the Broadway production, which is in 2019. So I'm going to highlight that in yellow. However, Green also explained that he had seen the earlier version in 2016 and had found the storytelling to be very confusing. This is where we can use that other color to contrast. So we need to show that Green liked the one in 2019 on Broadway, but didn't really like the one in 2016 off Broadway. So choice A, the 2016 version of Hadestown had fewer storytelling problems than the 2019. Well, no, he liked the 2019, not the 2016. So get rid of A is basically an information reversal. Hadestown should have had a larger production in 2019 than it actually did. I don't know that. I don't know if a larger production is going to be a better thing or a worse thing. I need some additional information so we can eliminate that. Then choice C, the 2019 of Hadestown was less enjoyable than the 2016 version. Well, no, the 2019 is the one that Green enthusiastically praised. So again, this is backwards from the information. You have to pay attention to the details. But then Hadestown improved greatly between 2016 and its premiere on Broadway. That matches the chronology and the detail. So we'll click back to number 12 after selecting D for 13. Here we're being asked to support the researcher's hypothesis. So we're going to highlight that task. We read on the left, researchers hypothesize that a decline in the population of dusky sharks near the mid-Atlantic coast of North America led to a decline in the population of eastern oysters in the region. Dusky sharks do not typically consume eastern oysters, but do consume cow-nose rays, which are the main predators of the oysters. So we're going to focus on the hypothesis. But because of the details that are provided, we should have a mental prediction here. And I'm just going to put P for prediction. In my notes, we need to show that the shark decline led to an increase in the cow-nose ray population, because that's what's happening from like a transitive property perspective. The sharks go down, even though they don't eat the oysters, they eat the thing that eats the oysters. So we need to show that the cow-nose rays did in fact increase because the sharks went down. So choice A, declines in the regional abundance of dusky sharks prey other than cow-nose rays are associated with regional declines in dusky shark abundance. Well, what does that have to do with the oysters, though? I need additional information for A, so we should be able to eliminate it immediately. Choice B, eastern oyster abundance tends to be greater in areas with both dusky sharks and cow-nose rays than in areas with only dusky sharks. Well, we aren't talking about only dusky sharks. We're talking about only cow-nose rays. So B has got the information kind of backwards. Then choice C, consumption of Easter oysters by cow-nose rays in the region substantially increased before the regional decline in dusky shark abundance began. Well, we don't care about before the decline, and if anything, this makes it seem like there was something else that caused the rays to be able to eat the oysters. So C needs additional information is kind of something that would weaken the hypothesis. There's got to be something else out there. But then choice D, cow-nose rays have increased in regional abundance as dusky sharks have decreased in regional abundance. Ding, ding, ding. That is absolutely the correct answer. And having that broad prediction hopefully can help you you move more briskly through these argument style questions such as number 12. We'll click back. Here we've got a question asking for a quote from a work by a historian that would best illustrate the student's claim. So we're going to have to focus on the student's claim. In a research paper, a student criticizes some historians of modern African politics, claiming that they have evaluated PL, the first prime minister of what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, primarily as a symbol rather than in terms of his actions. So the student criticizes these historians for evaluating this person as a symbol than in terms of his actions. So we just got to get the highlighter to work. There it goes. So reading choice A, L is a difficult figure to evaluate due to the starkly conflicting opinions he inspired during his life and continues to inspire today. Okay, what does it have to do between today and then? I don't know. That would need additional information. A is out. Choice B, the available information makes it clear that L's political beliefs and values were largely consistent throughout his career. Again, what does this have to do with that symbol versus actions thing? So we'll eliminate choice B for that reason. Then choice C, L's practical accomplishments can be passed over quickly. It is mainly as the personification of Congolese independence that he warrants scholarly attention. Well, practical accomplishments would match the actions that were passed over, and personification would be the symbol that was focused on. So C really does match the student's criticism. And then choice D, many questions remain about L's ultimate vision for an independent Congo without new evidence coming to light. New evidence? What new evidence? Again, this introduces an entirely new concept. We'll eliminate choice D for that reason and click back to number 10. Here we're being asked, in the text, which point does Prospero most directly make about Miranda and her memories? So we're going to focus on Prospero making a comment about Miranda and her memories. So the following text is from Shakespeare's play The Tempest, first performed in 1611. Miranda has lived on an island with her father Prospero since she was 3 years old. Prospero has stated that Miranda likely does not remember anything other than her life on the island. So that's Prospero's background. We might want to note that. Miranda says, "'Tis far off and rather like a dream than an assurance that my remembrance warrants, had I not 4 or 5 women that once tended me." So that is Miranda's memory. Prospero says, "Thou hadst and more, Miranda." So he is basically validating it. But how is it that this lives in thy mind? What seest thou else? So he's basically kind of impressed that she can still remember it. In the dark backward and abysm of time, if thou rememberest how and thou camest here. That's hard to read, so you might just go briskly through that. How thou camest here, thou mayst. So basically he's saying, it's surprising she remembers things, she might know more. So A, Miranda's reminiscences about her early childhood have a melancholy quality. There's nothing indicating they are melancholy. A is eliminated. Choice B, Miranda's doubts about the accuracy of one recollection. It's not doubting. She's actually right. I mean, she's absolutely right, and Prospero thinks she's right. Choice C, Miranda's ability to summon details of an experience she had before arriving on the island suggests that she may be able to summon details of her arrival on the island. Absolutely matches Prospero's statements and the background. And then Miranda's impression of a scene is vague because she's remembering a scenario she had daydreamed about. It is not about daydreaming. She was right. So that we can eliminate. We'll eliminate choice D. And our correct answer is C. We head back to number 9, where we're being asked for the main idea of the text. So we want to highlight the things that would capture the big picture. Culinary anthropologist VSG may be known for her decades of work in national public television and radio, but her book, I don't really need to read that, is likely her most influential project. In the 1970 book, whose title refers to SG's roots in the low country of South Carolina, was unusual for its time. It combined memoir, recipes, travel writing, and social commentary, and challenged notions about conventions of food and cooking, long admired by many. The book and its author have shaped contemporary approaches to writing about cuisine. And there's our little timer. You'll just click out of that. Try not to be influenced by it. Just keep doing what you're doing. So we know that the book is this VSG's most influential project. So we're going to just highlight those pieces. So choice A, SG's unconventional book is an important contribution to food writing. Seems good to what we just highlighted. SG held many different positions over her life. Well, we don't want to focus on all of her different positions, so goodbye to choice B. Highlighting why as we go. Choice C, SG's groundbreaking book didn't receive the praise it deserved. What? No, I mean, that is not the main idea, and we know it was unusual, but we don't know that it didn't get praise at that time. SG was a talented chef whose work inspired many people to start cooking for themselves. She was actually not necessarily a talented chef. So D can be eliminated for that reason. We'll click back to number 8. Here, again, we're being asked for the overall structure of the text. We will focus on the big picture. The NCP, the fixed point around which stars in the northern hemisphere appear to rotate, is discernible only at night. Inspired by the navigational strategies of some insects and birds, researchers devised a method for locating the NCP in daytime using skylight polarization, which occurs at atmospheric particles scatter sunlight. A polarimetric camera captures images of polarization patterns which rotate as the sun's position in the sky changes. Temporal variances across images can then be used to determine an observer's latitude and bearing relative to the NCP. So we know there's this issue, the NCP only visible at night, or only discernible at night. And then these researchers have devised a method for locating it in daytime. And then we've got the explanation of what that method is. So we'll just highlight those pieces. So starting with choice A, it illustrates how most navigational tools utilize the NCP. No, it doesn't. So as soon as I find that, we can eliminate choice A. Choice B, it presents a celestial-based method of navigation, maybe, enumerates the comparative benefits of an alternative method. No, we're not saying that the animals use something else. So that's not it. So we can eliminate choice B for that reason. Choice C, it explains how the NCP is typically located. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that at all. We get the new one, or the new method. So goodbye to C. It notes an obstacle to observing an astronomical phenomenon. Yes, it's only discernible at night. Mentions a navigational ability of certain animals that inspired a solution. Absolutely. And then explains how they use an optical device to mimic the ability. Absolutely. We select D. We hit back to the next one. Here again, we're being asked about the main purpose of the text. We'll highlight it. So the following text is from this poem, who is a citizen of the Salish and Kootenai tribes. There shall be new roads wending, a new beating of the drum. Men's eyes shall have fresh seeing, gray lives reprise their span. But under the new sun's being, completing what night began, there'll be the same backs bending, the same sad feet shall drum. When this night finds its ending, and day shall have come. So we get a new beating of the drum, and we've got a new sun, and we complete what night began, but then it happens again. So it's basically just the cycle of life. So we'll have that mental prediction based on what we highlighted. So choice A, to consider how the repetitiveness inherent in human life can be both rewarding and challenging. Maybe, kind of, don't love it, but we'll hold on to it. To question whether activities completed at one time of day. What now? There's nothing about these specific activities, so goodbye to B. Choice C, to refute the idea that joy is a more commonly experienced emotion than sadness is. No, I mean, there's no clear indication of which is more common. Then choice D, to demonstrate how the experiences of individuals relate to the experiences of their communities. There's no such comparison in choice D, so our correct answer is A, and we hit back to number 6. Once again, being asked about the overall structure of a text. Companies are providing consumers with more opportunities to purchase customized products than ever before. Whether buying customized sneakers, jewelry, or clothing, consumers can participate in the design of products to meet their specific tastes and needs. In turn, companies profit too. Studies have shown that consumers are willing to pay more and wait longer for a customized product. Still, it can be difficult for companies to offer customization while keeping costs low, as the standard methods of mass production may not be able to accommodate making a unique product each time. So we know they've got more opportunities for customization, and they are willing to pay more and wait longer, but it can be difficult to offer customization while keeping costs low. So basically, we've just got that idea. It discusses several recent innovations in product manufacturing. Absolutely not. It does not. So goodbye to choice A. It describes a company's recent success with new products. It absolutely does not. So we can eliminate choice B. It introduces a trend in consumer products and then explains how the trend both benefits and poses challenges to companies. Absolutely, it does. It does not contrast two product marketing techniques. So goodbye to D. And as time expires, the module completes and you'll be dumped directly into the next module, which we will cover in our next video.